임실 치즈를 널리 알리기 위해서 하는 목적이 가장 크고요. 그다음 우리 아이들은 촉감 발달, 오감 발달을 하기 위해서 또 체험을 진행하고 있습니다.
전에는 토마토가 그리 대중화되지 않았어요. 대중화되기는 한 10년 된 것 같아요. 그 이유가 토마토가 10대 그 건강식품 중에 들어갔다는 거죠.
진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K-바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지?
김치? 종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색.
김밥? 시장에선, 산에선, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥? 취향 따라, 입맛 따라.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸? 요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도, 인생 번호를 찾을 수도 있지.
제일 핫한 포토 스팟은 여기!
한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
How to survive in Korea. Cafes. Step 1. Find a seat. Before ordering, find a seat. Laptop, ID, smartphone, jacket, whatever that can mark your territory. But no bites. It's a little too big. Step 2. Pick up. We do not ask or call your name. We call out, B69번 고객님. The buzzer will vibrate when your order is ready at the counter. Wait, got your straw? Keep the top of the wrapper on. Doing this is more hygienic. Step 3. Cafe etiquette. If you need to use your laptop, find a seat next to a socket. No extra charge for using electricity. But if you're staying over 3 hours, how about ordering another drink or dessert? Step 4. Last bite standing. There's a mysterious custom in Korea. The last bite standing. When there's about 1 bite left of that cake, nobody will go for it. You might be tempted, but don't be hasty. Right before you get up, take the last piece saying that you simply can't waste food, or just leave it. It will save a few calories. Did you survive at the cafe? Did someone behind the counter catch your eye? Go for the same drink every single day.
오늘도 아이스 말차 라떼 드실 거죠?
You might make an impression.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, December 17th, here in South Korea, the Constitutional Court is scheduled to hold its first hearing next Friday and has requested a written response from President Yoon Suk-yeol regarding the impeachment trial against him. And prosecutors here have served President Yoon Suk-yeol with a second summons for questioning over his intentions to unilaterally impose martial law on the night of December 3rd. South Korea has included in its sanctions list over 24 individuals and institutions believed to have violated multiple UN Security Council resolutions in pursuit of a hostile weapons policy. We start with the latest regarding the legal proceedings by the Constitutional Court as it undertakes the impeachment trial of President Yoon Suk-yeol. Kim Do-yeon has our top story.
The delivery of documents by the Constitutional Court to President Yoon Suk-yeol has been made, but the confirmation of receipt is yet to be sent by President Yoon's legal team. This, according to the Constitutional Court on Tuesday, with the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Chair of the Parliamentary, Legislative and Judiciary Committee, and the Justice Minister confirming their receipt.
Yesterday, on December 16th, notifications regarding the filing of the impeachment adjudication request, the request for a written response and opinion, the decision to refer the case to preparatory proceedings, as well as notices of preparatory proceeding dates and attendance requirements were all sent out. The president is currently in the process of being served.
According to the rules, the president's legal team has 7 days to answer the documents, which were delivered via mailman, express mail, and an electronic system. But with the receipt of the initial documents not confirmed by the legal team, this could delay the proceedings at the court because President Yoon's team could claim that it didn't receive anything. Currently, a preparatory hearing has been scheduled for December 27th, but this is also in jeopardy of being pushed back. In the meantime, the court does not plan to broadcast the hearings live, according to the spokesperson. And when asked about whether acting President Han Duck-soo appointing 3 recommended justices to the court later on is acceptable, the spokesperson replied that it has been done before. After former President Park Geun-hye was impeached, then acting President Hwang Kyo-ahn appointed justices to the Constitutional Court. However, that was after the court ruled on the impeachment, confirming that President Park was not coming back to office. 김도현, Arirang News.
And the president has been served with a fresh summons by prosecutors for questioning on charges of insurrection. Our Moon Hae-ryeon reports.
South Korean prosecutors investigating the December 3rd declaration of martial law have issued a second summons to President Yoon, urging him to appear for questioning by December 21st. The summons was sent by the prosecution's special investigation team on Monday, but whether or not Yoon will comply is unclear. Last week, the prosecution made a formal request for Yoon to appear for questioning as a suspect on charges of insurrection and abuse of power. But this was declined by the president's legal representatives, who said that his legal team was not finalized. Should he fail to comply with the second summons, prosecutors will analyze his reasons for refusal and consider whether to issue another summons or seek a court-approved arrest warrant to secure his appearance. If he does comply, it would be the first time in South Korean history for a president to appear before prosecutors as a criminal suspect. The Joint Investigation Team, a collaboration between the National Police Agency Special Investigation Team, the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials, and the Criminal Investigation Command of the Defense Ministry, reported that a summons was sent via express mail to President Yoon's official residence on Tuesday morning. However, it went undelivered as the president refused to accept it and returned the package. It notifies Yoon of a request for him to appear at the CIO located in Kwaton City in Gyeonggi-do Province on Wednesday at 10 a.m. for questioning on accusations of insurrection and abuse of power. A summons also went undelivered the day before after security staff at the presidential office reportedly refused to accept it, giving the suspension of the president's duties as the reason, and the staff at his official residence refused to cooperate. The team attempted to conduct further raids of the President's Security Service Center on Tuesday, as reports indicated that the center's server contains encrypted records of phone calls between President Yoon and the National Police Agency Commissioner General on the day of the martial law declaration. Investigators obtained only a portion of materials through voluntary submission in a raid last week. With President Yoon hit with a summons from both the prosecution and the CIO, eyes are on which agency will get to investigate the sitting president. Some expect that Yoon would favor being questioned by prosecutors, having spent nearly 30 years as a prosecutor and even served as the prosecutor general. Others believe Yoon should be questioned by the CIO rather than face former subordinates from during his time at the prosecutor's office. The prosecution and police continue to pursue key figures involved in the martial law declaration. Former Defense Minister Kim Yong-hyun refused to appear for questioning, and attempts to forcibly bring him in failed, prompting the prosecution to extend the deadline for his detention by 11 days to the 28th. Former Special Warfare Commander Kwak Jong-un was arrested Monday, while an arrest warrant has been issued for Capital Defense Commander Lee Jin-woo. Suspended Army Chief of Staff General Park An-soo, who was named the martial law commander, was arrested on Tuesday after he reportedly decided to waive his pre-trial defense hearing, leaving the court to decide on his arrest based on submitted evidence. Police have also applied for an arrest warrant for former Commander Do Sang-won of the Defense Intelligence Command under charges of insurrection. Moon Hae-ryeon, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, ruling and opposition parties are engaged in a fresh war of words over prospects of filling constitutional court vacancies ahead of the court's ruling on the president's impeachment trial. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young explains.
Bipartisan tensions are escalating over the appointment of 3 vacant constitutional court justices for President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial. The disagreement focuses on whether acting President Han Duck-soo can make the appointments while President Yoon's duties are suspended following the passage of the impeachment motion. Ruling People Power Party acting chairman Kwon Song-dong argued on Tuesday that currently appointing constitutional court justices is beyond the authority of an acting president.
The acting president can appoint constitutional court justices when the presidency is vacant, but not when the president's duties are suspended.
However, main opposition Democratic Party floor leader Park Chan-dae emphasized that Yoon's impeachment trial should proceed under a 9-member constitutional court. Park countered Kwon's remarks, saying there was no issue with the acting president making appointments, as the assembly recommends the justices and the acting president only approves them.
Claiming that an acting president can't make appointments during the president's suspensions is mere wordplay. The PPP should stop delaying procedures and quickly agree to set a date for the confirmation hearings.
The court currently has only 6 justices, with 3 vacancies unfilled since October due to a failure by the rival parties to agree on appointments. In December, the DP proposed Jeong Kae-sun and Ma Eun-hyuk as candidates, while the PPP recommended Do Han-chang. The DP is pushing to hold confirmation hearings for these candidates at the National Assembly next Monday and Tuesday, aiming to pass a confirmation motion during a plenary session on December 30th. However, the PPP argues that no agreement has been reached between the parties on the matter. Currently, just 1 judge is needed to reject the impeachment. However, if the 3 new judges are appointed in time to review and rule, it will take 4 judges to dismiss the impeachment. 신하영, Arirang News.
Washington has reaffirmed its commitment to Seoul, adding that their alliance is not simply a partnership between their presidents, but also between the governments and people of the 2 countries. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reports.
Washington says there has been no diminution in the South Korea-U.S. alliance after the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. Those remarks were made by U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller during the press briefing on Monday. When asked if there will be a gap in U.S.-South Korea foreign policy and security, Miller said the alliance between Seoul and Washington is not just an alliance between presidents, but rather between governments and an alliance between peoples.
That alliance is not just an alliance between presidents, it is an alliance between governments and an alliance between peoples. And our commitment to that alliance remains ironclad.
Miller also mentioned how South Korea demonstrated its democratic resilience over the past few weeks. Seoul peacefully followed a process that was laid out by the Constitution, he said, and added the U.S. is ready to continue to work with the acting president and the South Korean government in the same way that it was acting and cooperating with President Yoon. Meanwhile, the UN said on Monday that it trusts the strength of South Korea's constitutional system in regard to the impeachment of Yoon. At a regular briefing at the UN headquarters in New York, UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said that they witnessed that the declaration of martial law only lasted for a few hours, and how constitutional procedures are being carried out. Earlier on December 4th, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had commented on the declaration and subsequent lifting of martial law by President Yoon Suk-yeol, saying, "We welcome the lifting of martial law and are closely monitoring the situation." Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Acting President Han Duck-soo presided over his first cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday and pledged commitment to better supporting those in need. Our Oh Soo-young has more.
Acting President and Prime Minister Han Duck-soo is pledging all governmental efforts towards reviving the local economy as he called for a swift budgetary execution for the new year. This came on Tuesday during Han's first cabinet meeting following the suspension of President Yoon Suk-yeol's executive powers, noting that while the country's broader financial and foreign exchange markets have been stabilizing gradually, small businesses and the self-employed are continuing to struggle. He called on the Finance Ministry to quickly complete its budgetary allocation so that next year's finances can be executed on the first day of the new year. He requested all available resources, including national finances, public institutions, and private investments, to be directed towards execution in the first half of 2025.
In particular, I urge that special attention be given to the swift execution of budgets aimed at easing the livelihood burdens of working people, protecting vulnerable groups, supporting small businesses, and fostering advanced industries to invigorate the economy for South Korea's future.
He also asked relevant ministries to prepare effective measures for the 2025 economic policy direction and to actively heed the voices of small firms. Han further said the National Assembly should ensure the swift passage of laws directly related to business investment, such as special acts on nurturing the semiconductor industry and artificial intelligence. Amid concerns that the country's leadership in limbo would constrain its diplomatic outreach, the acting president also placed emphasis on South Korea's foreign relations. Han said he assured US President Joe Biden that South Korea would continue to strengthen the bilateral alliance and that the country's governance will adhere to laws and the Constitution. The two leaders held a phone call on Sunday, less than 12 hours after Han assumed duties as the interim head of state. Biden reportedly praised the resilience of Korean democracy, affirming that the solid South Korea-U.S. alliance remains unchanged. The acting president did not introduce a motion to veto a series of bills put forward by the opposition-held parliament, including the Grain Management Act, but is expected to do so later this week in a special cabinet session. Han is aiming to promote better relations between parliament and both the ruling and opposition parties in order to stabilize the state of national affairs. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea has blacklisted more North Korean as well as Russian individuals and institutions that have violated numerous UN Security Council resolutions. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has details.
3 North Korean military officials and 1 missile developer believed to have been deployed to Russia in support of the Ukraine war have been newly added to South Korea's list of sanctions against North Korea. They include Kim Yong-bok, Deputy Chief of the General Staff of the Korean People's Army, and Shin Kim-chul, Director of its Operations Bureau. 7 other Russian individuals and 15 entities, mostly Russian, were also put on the list.
Our government has imposed sanctions on 11 individuals and 15 entities involved in procuring funds and materials for North Korea's nuclear and missile programs and military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, which is a violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions.
Also on Tuesday, the foreign ministers of 10 countries, including South Korea, the U.S., and Japan, as well as the High Representative of the European Union, issued a joint statement, saying that they condemn military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow in the strongest possible terms. The top diplomats reaffirmed their commitment to supporting Ukraine while urging Russia to immediately end its war of aggression. Meanwhile, the White House has confirmed that a number of North Korean troops deployed to assist Russia's war efforts have been killed in action. The U.S. National Security Council spokesperson on Monday said it now believes North Korean troops are on the front lines of the war and that they're actively engaged in combat operations, but did not say the actual number of North Korean casualties.
But we do believe that they have suffered some significant losses, killed and wounded. But it's difficult for me to put an actual number on it. I would say certainly in the realm of dozens, several dozens.
The comments come as Ukraine's intelligence officials have said around 30 North Korean soldiers were killed or wounded so far during a battle with the Ukrainian forces over the weekend. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has nominated former investment banker and diplomat George Klaas as the next U.S. ambassador to Japan. The nomination was shared in a post on his Truth Social network in which Mr. Trump claimed Klaas would serve to place priority on America. Under the first Trump administration, Klaas served as U.S. ambassador to Portugal. He is also known for his tough stance on China. K-pop girl group Twice has yet again secured a spot within the top 10 of Billboard's main albums chart. The group's latest EP, Strategy, ranked 4th in the Billboard 200 chart. This fresh ranking marks the 6th time in a row that Twice has had an album rank among the top 10. And Twice now holds the record for the most top 10 EPs among K-pop girl groups. Twice topped the Billboard 200 for the first time earlier this year with the EP With Youth.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. A shooting took place at the Abundant Life Christian School in Wisconsin on Monday morning, where police say that a teacher and a teenage student were killed and 6 others injured. The suspect, also a student at the school, was found dead when the police arrived. Now, Madison Police Chief Sean Barnes said that they received a call of an active shooter at the Wisconsin school at 10:57 on Monday morning local time, and that they found multiple victims suffering from gunshot wounds upon arrival. Among the 6 injured, 2 reportedly have life-threatening injuries. Barnes added that a handgun was recovered from the scene and no police officers had to fire their weapons. While police declined to provide additional information on the shooter, CNN reported that a law enforcement source confirmed that the suspect was a female. Authorities say that the motive for the shooting is yet to be identified and that the suspect's family is cooperating with the investigation. According to CNN, Monday's incident is at least the 83rd school shooting of 2024, the most school shootings in a single year since 2008. Moving over to Germany, the country's Chancellor Olaf Scholz has lost a vote of confidence in Parliament on Monday, paving the way for early elections at the end of February. Germany's parliament, the Bundestag, voted 207 for Scholz and 394 against, while 116 abstained. Following the collapse of Scholz's three-party coalition government last month, the German Chancellor expected to lose Monday's vote. This will lead to early elections in February 23rd rather than in September as originally planned. Now, Scholz said ahead of Monday's vote that it is now up to the voters to determine the political course of our country, expressing an eagerness for the snap elections. He had been running a lame duck government after the Free Democrats left the coalition over a budget dispute, leaving the Greens and his Social Democratic Party with a minority government. The cryptocurrency Bitcoin surpassed $107,000 at a point on Monday, U.S. Eastern Time, according to CoinGecko, setting a new record high. The surge came shortly after U.S. President-elect Donald Trump reiterated his plans to create a U.S. Bitcoin strategic reserve, a tactical storage of the cryptocurrency similar to that of its strategic petroleum reserve. Now, the global head of technology research at Wedbush Securities called it a new golden age for Bitcoin, saying that Trump's deregulatory environment is a huge positive for the cryptocurrency market. A Chinese businessman accused of spying for the Chinese Communist Party in the UK has been identified as Yang Tengbo. Yang, who the UK Home Office said was likely to pose a threat to UK national security, is under suspicion of engaging in covert and deceptive activity for the United Front Work Department, an arm of the Chinese Communist Party state apparatus. Yang was banned from entering the UK in 2023, with the ban upheld by UK's National Security Court last week. According to a High Court judge, Yang had formed an unusual degree of trust with the UK's Prince Andrew, who had authorized an international financial initiative to engage with potential Chinese investors and partners. Now, Yang has denied all accusations in a statement issued by his lawyers. Kim Siang, Arirang News.
As the cold wind strengthened, the feels like temperatures stayed below zero throughout the day today. Tomorrow will be the coldest day of this winter so far, with temperatures plunging to -6 degrees Celsius in the morning in Seoul. A cold wave warning will be issued for northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and western parts of Gangwon-do province. Rain or snow will begin tonight on Jeju Island, the west coast areas of Chungcheongnam-do province, and the western parts of the Jeollado provinces. Up to 5 to 10 centimeters of snow will accumulate by tomorrow afternoon. With further there, heavy snow of up to 10 centimeters is expected in east coast areas tomorrow night. Tomorrow, many areas will have a freezing morning. Daejeon -4 degrees, Gyeongju -3. Highs in Seoul will only move up to 1 degree, Gwangju 3 degrees. Frigid winter conditions will continue with snow in some areas this whole week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, and today we touch upon the diplomatic implications of the political fallout here. Do stay with us.
Step into a world where culture speaks beyond words, bridging hearts and minds. Hello, this is your DJ Sujung for Culture Crunch. Crunch on a new flavour of K-culture with me every day.
The future course of South Korea's foreign policy has been rendered uncertain, given the parliament's vote in favor of the president's impeachment motion. We have more on the diplomatic repercussions of these latest events on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective. It is Tuesday, December 17th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we revisit the broader diplomatic implications of the political fallout here in South Korea. So what have been the reactions from our friends and our foes, if you will, to news of the president's suspension from duty? To answer this question, I have Shin Hyun with Agence France Presse here in the studio. Shin, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
I also have Stephen Borwick with Nikkei Asia here in the studio as well. Stephen, as always, it's good to have you here.
Nice to be here.
Right, Hyun, we'll start with you. Let's begin then with the latest from the Constitutional Court regarding the political fate of the suspended president.
Yes, so President Yoon has been suspended from his position as of Saturday evening. And Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will now be the interim leader of South Korea. He'll govern the country a maximum of 8 months, depending on how long the deliberation will take and what the results are. So the Constitutional Court has about 180 days, so 6 months, to deliberate the motion. And the last such motion that happened was former President Park Geun-hye, and that only took 92 days to review the motion and remove her from office. So what happens is the Constitutional Court requires 6 votes in favour of the motion in order for the motion to pass. And they have currently 9 seats. But currently there are only 6 members and 3 seats are empty, which means that the 3 seats need to be nominated. And as Parliament Speaker Woo Won-sik said, the National Assembly will do its best to appoint the other 3 members. However, yesterday the Constitutional Court did say in a statement that doing it with 6 judges is fully possible and a deliberation with them is fully possible, but that would mean that the vote would have to be unanimous.
Right. And in the meantime, Stephen, what has been the reaction from neighbouring Japan to the result of the impeachment vote this past Saturday?
The Prime Minister said that he wishes for Tokyo to keep communicating with South Korea. I mean, I think it's the kind of middle-of-the-road, temperate statement that you would expect when you're talking about a country that's in a kind of major transition period. I don't think there's really all that much that diplomats and other officials in Japan can really say as the situation here plays itself out. Like as Hyun just laid out, like we've passed this kind of significant milestone of Yoon having been formally impeached, but there's still this court process that needs to play itself out. A lot of like Korea-Japan relations will ultimately depend on who wins the presidential election, when and if we get one. If it's the left-leaning Democratic Party, then there might be some fairly significant changes to Korea-Japan relations because there's just a kind of different orientation towards relations with Japan than the Yoon administration put forth. But I think Japan is among Korea's many diplomatic partners that have really little choice right now, but just kind of wait and see what happens and just kind of hope that they can maintain a sort of baseline level of cooperation in the meantime.
Right, which is also probably the case for those in the U.S. I mean, here, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken claimed that the impeachment vote stood as proof of Korea's democratic resilience. Could you tell us a bit more about the response from the U.S.?
Well, it is an understatement to say Blinken's response till now has been somewhat measured but very firm throughout. I mean, South Korea is one of the United States' most important allies, and they do have troops here. So it's really important for Washington to know what is going on with the country's democracy. Initially, when the martial law was lifted, Blinken did say he welcomed President Yoon's decision to rescind the order, and he also said that he hopes South Korea will resolve all these conflicts in accordance with the rule of law. And this came in the context of that the President Biden administration did say that they were not notified beforehand about
the martial law, and also National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan adding that they actually learned about the martial law through watching the news. So a lot of experts did worry that this will actually harm the alliance in some way, and especially trust-wise. However, after the impeachment vote was finalized, Blinken did say that South Korea demonstrated democratic resilience, and he also said that they've seen South Korea follow peacefully a process within their constitutional order. And he also added, which is I think very important, that he's ready to work with President Han, referring to Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. And he also mentioned about the ROK-U.S. alliance, saying that it was very ironclad. It was the same with the State Department as well. Matthew Miller saying that the alliance is still going on strong and they look forward to working with South Korea. So clearly, these quotes do show that the alliance does remain strong and it is unharmed despite the martial law.
Right, despite the political disorder here. Stephen, North Korean media, that is, also covered the result of the South Korean parliament's impeachment vote. What exactly did the media there say?
I think we could say that they kind of gloated over it. You know, like they seemed a little bit smugly kind of happy to see this dysfunction in our people in South Korea. One thing that I thought was interesting about it was if you read the KCNA dispatch, they really highlighted the role of public dissatisfaction and the kind of people power element of this. They said something like throngs of enraged people converged on the National Assembly and they sort of pushed Yoon out of office. I counted, in this KCNA dispatch, they used the English language one, they used the word puppet 20 times, which I wondered if that was a record. But the reason that I thought that homing in on that aspect of it was interesting was because in recent years, in the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of measures in North Korea to really crack down on any kind of expressions of popular dissent, access to any kind of culture that would change the way people think and kind of getting people perhaps to have ideas about pushing back against the very repressive state in North Korea. We've seen expansions of border security to make it harder and harder to get out of the country. So by all indications, this is a state, this is a leadership that is increasingly nervous about keeping their own people in line. So I thought it was, in both Korean and English versions, I thought it was interesting that they chose to highlight the fact that this is an example of a population rising up and pushing its own leader out of office. Of course, that is something that the South Korean system allows for, that it has mechanisms for, but the North Korean system, of course, does not. I mean, so that North Korea does not enjoy civil and political rights, so it's not possible to mount a kind of activist or a mass assembly kind of effort to change the way things work. But I thought that was interesting and perhaps indicated something about the way that North Koreans are thinking. Perhaps it was just as simple as wanting to demonstrate Yoon Suk-yeol's unpopularity. I had one analyst tell me that the reason that until this one dispatch came out, North Korea was kind of keeping quiet because they wanted to make sure that Yoon got out of office, because Yoon had made some comments about North Korea that were a little bit provocative and that the Pyongyang leadership wouldn't have liked. He made a speech in August of this year on Liberation Day where he kind of encouraged North Koreans to rise up against to kind of become, I think, warriors for unification. He put it so, if anyone in North Korea misses or is upset about Yoon being out of office, I don't think they're speaking up. There's probably not very many of them. Right. The regime for now seems to be using the political fallout here as a kind of propaganda purpose. As they tend to do. As they tend to do. Yoon, quite a big portion of the foreign media coverage continues to focus on the potential reasons behind President Yoon Suk-yeol's unilateral decision to declare martial law on the night of December 3rd. What are some of the more common explanations shared by the foreign media?
So even before the martial law happened, Yoon was considered as one of the most unpopular presidents in the history of Korea, and that was due to a row of scandals that most of them had nothing to do with him. Rather, they had to do with the First Lady. And so he was accused of abusing his presidential vetoes, notably to strike down a bill to investigate allegedly the First Lady's stock manipulation charges as well. And so President Yoon explained the reason why he declared martial law as that he wanted to safeguard the country's liberal democracy from anti-state elements and threats posed by North Korea. But he did give little explanation to what these threats exactly were and what these forces were as well. And also this martial law came in the context of a whole budget war between the opposition party when the opposition cut around about 1.4 trillion won for next year's budget. And Yoon complained that the opposition party was cutting all these nations' core function budgets. And the problem is he has been a lame duck since earlier this year because the opposition party actually won a parliamentary election for a majority. So he did have no say in the parliament votes at all. Yoon also said that one of the reasons why he declared martial law was because he needed to send the military to the national election commissions, saying that the commission was vulnerable to hacking, and he doubled down on the electoral fraud claims, which is quite considered as far-right conspiracy theories. And he's justified that he had no intention of damaging the constitutional order, but rather he wanted to warn the opposition party and if they were to keep on doing what they were doing right now. Experts do see this as kind of a move of desperation to break out, both in like a political and policy sense, but in the end, it was really poorly played.
Right. A desperate, perhaps, attempt to assert authority then,
yes,
over perhaps the opposition party. Stephen, there is also continued coverage about the diplomatic impact of a prolonged political paralysis here in the country. What are some of the concerns being raised?
Well, to borrow a phrase from the Yoon administration, Korea is in some ways a pivotal state. So any kind of disruption to governance here is going to be felt around the world. A lot of countries conduct a lot of trade with Korea. A lot of countries have defense partnerships with Korea. The APEC summit is scheduled to be held here next year. So I'm sure there is concern, but we have to keep in mind that like a lot of the real day-to-day work of these matters does not take place on the executive level of government. It takes place, by our rank and file government workers who are communicating with their counterparts overseas. And there's no really strong reason to believe that, for example, the activities of the foreign ministry or the activities of the trade ministry are being significantly disrupted by now. I think there's a consensus among even the dueling political parties that like the business, to whatever extent is possible, business as usual needs to continue. So I think just for context, we also need to keep in mind that this is not the first, political upheaval we've seen in contemporary South Korean history. This kind of thing has happened before, and it's not going to be as surprising or as shocking here as it might be in some other places. And for that reason, it's probably not going to be as disruptive. So let's also keep in mind that like even on December 4th, the morning of December 4th, the day right after this happened, like life went on as usual. Like schools were open, businesses were open, government offices were open. I've met many Korean government officials over the years, and I've known them all to be very hardworking and very professional and very serious about what they do. So as of now, I don't think there's any indication, there's any reason to believe that there are big disruptions in the offing. Financial markets are functioning, traffic at ports and airports are going ahead. So I think Korea has earned a reputation as an ultimately stable country, and I don't think there's too much nervousness in the air.
And speaking about the hard-working government officials that Stephen highlighted, Hyun, what are some of the priorities for the government here to minimize perhaps the internal repercussions of this political fallout?
Yeah, so I mean, the first and foremost priority, as Prime Minister Han Duck-soo put, is that they need to ensure that even not the slightest disruption can happen in the administration of state affairs. I mean, the challenges are immense. There are some ministers who have resigned, some who are still under investigation over their alleged roles of the insurrection. So it's very important to stabilize the ministries as soon as possible to prevent further destabilization. The other would obviously be the economy, since South Korea's economy was impacted the hardest by the political turmoil. The martial law definitely brought these uncertainties both in the domestic market and the international market as well. The impeachment kind of eased somewhat of this, but still South Korea's exchange rate did hit a 2-year low. And Prime Minister Han and the opposition leaders do agree that they do need a task force to stabilize the economy as soon as possible. The other risk would be security risks, especially posed by North Korea, since as Han put it, the Ukraine war is still ongoing, and the stakes are very high since North Korea's alliance with Russia is as strong as it can be possible, which is why one of the first things that Prime Minister Han did was directly speak to President Biden and ensure and reaffirm that the ROK-U.S. alliance is still ongoing, since the relationship is just critical to actually deter this North Korea aggression during this political turmoil.
And staying with this, Stephen, this is an impromptu question. Now, Mr. Trump is poised to come into power on the 20th of January. And there are some pundits who claim that as part of his plans to perhaps create a legacy, he might reach out to North Korea directly for dialogue. Keeping in mind the perhaps power vacuum here at the top office, chances are high that Mr. Trump may reach out to Kim Jong-un directly without South Korea being involved in these talks. What would be perhaps the danger, if you will, of such an engagement between the U.S. and North Korea in the absence of South Korea?
I'm going to answer a little bit of a different question. I'm just going to say, before we get into that, like the potential follow-up, potential danger, we have to, I think, first assess the likelihood of it. And I'm of the opinion that Kim Jong-un is probably not interested in more dialogue with Trump. I think he's kind of been down that road. And I think he suffered like what he experienced as an embarrassment in Hanoi several years ago. And so I don't think that just the optics or the high-level splash of a meeting with the American president really appeals to him all that much anymore. And I think he and the North Korean leadership more generally have concluded in recent years that there is not much for them to gain in the kind of U.S.-South Korea relationship. I mean, for North Korea, those two things are very much connected. They can't really parse them wholly separately. And everything that we've seen from North Korea in recent years has shown that they see relations with Russia and, to a lesser extent, China as their future. So I think even if Trump, I mean, first of all, when Trump takes office, I think he's going to have a lot more pressing matters to deal with, even on foreign policy. You know, the Ukraine war, the situation in Israel, Gaza, the relationship with China. Trump's first Asia priority is going to be finding some way to contain China. So he's going to need South Korea to do that. So I don't think he would reach out to North Korea immediately, because he knows that will kind of displease South Korea, and he's going to kind of have that in mind. And just like I said, going back to the likelihood of it, I just don't imagine that Kim Jong-un would be all that interested in engaging in that kind of meeting, because it would raise the possibility that he would fall short again in the way that he did in 2019, and he would probably ask for something like kind of guaranteed outcome from Trump, and Trump is not going to do that. So I see it as something of a dead end, but when you're talking about North Korea and Donald Trump, I mean, who knows?
All right. South Korea, under the current Yoon administration, has adopted a tough stance toward North Korea, of course. Do you suppose if South Korea were to come under, were to have the opposition Democratic Party in power, do you suppose dialogue with North Korea would be possible then?
I don't know what possible. I mean, I think they would be interested in it. I mean, if Lee Jae-myung is the president, and a lot of the kind of mainstream establishments of the DP are from that kind of late 80s activist generation for whom unification is a kind of overarching goal, and they, at least rhetorically, stick to this idea that engagement with North Korea is necessary, negotiations are necessary, and ultimately the two sides must use dialogue to find some kind of peaceful settlement. So I think they would want that, and I think they would, at least rhetorically, they would initiate that. You know, and if a DP leader becomes president, I think in his inauguration speech he would say something like, "And I'm up here to, you know, extend an overture to our brethren in the North." But whether or not North Korea would be interested in that is a very different question, and I would just go back to all indications that we have being that North Korea is not super interested in the relation with South Korea and the U.S. anymore, just because of the quite tense, restrictive effect of sanctions. And, you know, even under the Moon administration, for all the diplomatic activity they had and for all the outward shows of collegiality they had, they kept running up against this question of sanctions. And Moon was not willing to go far enough as to engage in contact with North Korea that would violate sanctions, because they still value the relationship with the U.S. They still value being a kind of responsible member of the international community. So it's possible in the sense that we can't rule it out, but I see a number of hurdles to it.
Right, for sure. And here, this is also an impromptu question, but if I were to ask you, and speaking, of course, as a journalist for Agence France-Presse, based on what you've seen on the ground, do you suppose prospects are quite high for the opposition party to win a snap election here in South Korea?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, currently the polls for the People's Power Party and the Democratic Party are like 8-2 currently at the minute, and the most trusted politicians in the polls from the first to the third are from the Democratic Party members. Clearly, the ruling party, or the PPP, have lost the trust from the people. So it will definitely take some time for them to build the trust with the people, and just let them know that this kind of thing will not happen again in their administration. Whereas the Democratic Party have definitely demonstrated their beliefs in democracy and how they will act to it, especially at the National Assembly. So they do definitely have a better chance.
Right. And Stephen, given the latest developments, what do you believe are perhaps some of the follow-up stories that are being planned perhaps by members of the foreign press like yourself?
Well, I'm on here with a colleague from a competing media organization, so I don't want to say too much about anything else I might be planning, but I feel like there's kind of two threads for coverage going ahead. One of them is procedural, and one of them is just like doing stories that allow readers to allow readers to understand what is going to happen next, how does it happen, how likely is it. Those are the kinds of stories that are hard to make particularly engaging for readers who are maybe not already interested in the mechanisms of the Korean legal system. I mean, it's kind of interesting that Korea has a constitutional court. You know, a lot of countries don't have those. They just decide everything at the Supreme Court level. And the mere existence of this constitutional court is kind of a legacy of the political dissension that has been a feature of South Korean history, in that you have this whole legal body whose real purpose is to mediate political disputes and to be a kind of authority to rule on those. So that's interesting. Another kind of thread that I have in mind for reporting is more kind of contextual, more sort of explanatory, doing reporting and getting stories that sort of illuminate, like, where did this come from? Why does South Korea, which is like on its face a wealthy and efficient and high functioning society, why does it have these kinds of bitter divisions? There was a good column in the Financial Times newspaper today by Korean economist Jang Ah-jun, where he sort of offered some theories as to part of the political upheavals that we see in Korea, or they're, to an extent, somewhere that they come from is these states' underinvestment in social welfare. Just the fact that there are a lot of people here who are struggling economically, like, who don't have access to decent jobs, who don't have strong incomes, particularly among older people. And it is, he argues that, like, to some extent, the reason that we see a very divisive political climate is because there are people who are in some ways dissatisfied and enjoying not the kind of material well-being that they would like, and they are therefore looking for answers to how they've ended up that way, and then they inevitably end up blaming someone and feeling angry to some extent. And he kind of suggested that the next Korean administration, to sort of calm the political climate and to maybe take steps to prevent this kind of thing, it ought to make more generous investments in welfare, in fair working conditions, in stronger wages, in maybe pensions, education, like all the things that people need to feel as though they are cared for and they have a stable life and a stable future. But that, of course, those are all very difficult questions that the next administration will have to tackle.
Right, but that really is, of course, a very important aspect of life, though, and addressing the concerns of the ordinary people in any country. All right, Stephen, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Hyun, thank you very much for your insights. Right, well, that brings us to the end of the Press Perspective for today. We return same time tomorrow with the economic implications of the political turmoil.